hello dear tea friends from around the world, and especially in North America, in Canada and the US, and also in the UK, everywhere where people speak English. I'm Stéphane Erler, the founder of the Tea Masters blog and the tea-masters.com tea boutique, bringing you some of the best teas from Taiwan and also some great teaware, including some chabu. This week I've added over 10 new chabu to my selection, so come and check them out. They are made by hand with love, and they make a great background for photographs, and also they are so pleasant when you are making tea to have these colors. It brings warmth and also quietness to your tea. Plus, this week I also have some new Oriental Beauties in my selection too, from Sinju. This Oriental Beauty Imperial and Tradition, and also a concubine from Sinju. But and you will see that it has a bit something to do with today's class about WuYi tea. We are going to I will make a summary of this book. It's a very dense book, over 240 pages. It's in Chinese, 245 pages. It's completely in Chinese. I've read and translated it. I've summarized it. So this is now, these are not exactly the words from Teaparker, who wrote the book, but from me. It was published in March 2003, so it's not very likely that it's easy to find in Taiwan anymore, and it has not been published, at least not officially, in China. So maybe the only way that for you to get to the information in this book is to listen to this class that I hope will be interesting, because what I find fascinating with Teaparker is his interest for history, and so the first chapters that we are going to talk about in this class are about the good old times in previous dynasties, and we'll see how WuYi tea started in these old dynasties. So it starts with chapter 1. In the history of the Tang and Song dynasty, and at that time it was not there was not no name like WuYi. The names that were used in this region were Beiyuan tea and Jian'an tea. Now Jian'an is still a village or a small town in Fujian that exists nearby WuYi. It's a bit it's not exactly WuYi. It's in the neighborhood, and it's more famous to be the birthplace of Shuexian, the Shuexian cultivar, and it's also where we know that Jianyang, the same Jian, bowls come from. But here Jian'an tea. Now around 1100, the year 1100, there were 16,000 tribute cakes that were made in WuYi, and the Chong'an County was established in the year 994. That is during the Northern Song dynasty. Another very important politician in Chinese history, called Fan Zhongyan, from the year 989 to 1052, he wrote, "The most amazing tea by the stream is the best in the world, and we immortals planted it since ancient times." So here we have a very famous, important person in China's history, and for him already 1000 years ago, the best tea in China, actually even in the world, but of course for him China is the world, is the tea that comes from WuYi, and it's so special, so great, that the plants have been planted by immortals, according to him. So in This shows that already during the Song dynasty, WuYi tea was considered or called Beiyuan tea or Jianan tea was really considered the best in China. Another very important person in Chinese history, the philosopher Zhu Xi, 1130 to 1200, he built a monastery on the Yinping Peak, and it was located next to the Huayan Zen temple. We'll see maybe in the next lesson that temples are still very important in WuYi's history, because that's where a lot of farmers came from. Monks would also cultivate tea in the WuYi mountains, and they were very important to keep the traditions. We come to the second chapter in the book. We are now during the Yuan dynasty. What happened there during the Yuan, that is the Mongol dynasty? Well, the Mongols did one thing. In WuYi, they set up an imperial tea garden. Before, during the Song, the gardens were owned by private farmers, and then the mandarins working for the court would come there and select the teas as a tribute and send them to court. For the Mongols, WuYi was such an important place for getting great tea that they even set up their own imperial garden. And the tribute that was sent from this garden, it grew from 20 kilograms in the year 1282 to 990 kilograms in the year 1368, which was the last year of the Mongol dynasty. So production almost shot up by a factor of 50. This really shows how they must have liked tea from this region and trying to get more and more. But it also shows that we are even less than 1 ton for 1 year for a whole court, which is composed of not just the emperor and his family, but he has lots of relatives. Of course, he has already concubines, he has children, mother, cousins. So imagine 1,000 or less than 1,000 kilo, that's not much. Also, he wants to gift some of the tea to generals, to important ministers in his court. So tea really was very rare and very precious in those times. That's also where we read that the whole area of WuYi is 2,798 square kilometer in surface. In chapter 3, we learn that an important place for tea merchants for WuYi tea was Xiame, which is a village located 4 kilometers east and downstream from this river, that Jiulong, that streams just around WuYi. In chapter 4, we continue with some history, and we learned that there was actually a ban, an export ban, during most of these dynasties, Song, Ming, and Yuan. And if you still exported, you could face a death penalty. So it was a very grave thing to do, to export tea from China. Because China was a little bit closed. One of the exceptions to this rule was during the Zheng expeditions. Zheng is a Muslim admiral who was born in Yunnan. He was hired by the Ming Emperor to go on an expedition. He built very large ships. He sailed up to Africa, and what we know is that in his ship he had some tea from WuYi that he brought as gift in order to exchange things with the countries where he would go. He even brought back some giraffes from Africa at that time. The Zhenghe expedition, the first one was held in 1405, and I think the last one in 1411. Unfortunately, these were the only ship expeditions from China. After that, it was forbidden for Chinese to even to take boats on international travel. And so how do we get to know about tea in Europe? So if the tea from China did not come from China, it's the Europeans who went to China to get it. So in 1607, we have the Dutch East Asia Company, which bought its first tea in China. And it became a hit in Europe, this tea thing. And in 1680, so 73 years later, tea was already an essential product in Europe. In the meantime, in 1644, the British established a trade office in Xiamen for the British East Asia Company, or East Indian Company. Here's the translation. I might not have translated it well. It competed with the Dutch East Asia Company, and sometimes this led to some skirmishes between the two companies. Of course, they were competing for the same products and the same, almost the same markets. In the development of tea in Europe, something happened also in that time. In 1662, Catherine of Braganza, Portugal, princess, married King Charles II of Scotland, England, and Ireland. And her dowry included porcelain and tea. Probably she was the very first person who included porcelain and tea in her dowry. And this tradition of having a tea set, porcelain tea set in your dowry reminds me that the last time I attended a wedding in France, there would be a wedding list that's newlywed things that they would like to buy for their home. And so I would go to a department store, and from the list I could see, in the list there's a whole set of porcelain plates, porcelain teaware that the couple wanted. So this is still something that people think of when they get wed, either for the dowry or as a wedding gift. And this tradition started with Catherine of Braganza from Portugal. Now in 1669, the British gave the monopoly of tea to the British East Asia Company. And this changed then the name. Instead of using cha, they would use tea, because the British Tea Company was mostly established in Xiamen, in Fujian. And it's in Fujian that they speak this Hokkien dialect, where they don't say cha, but they say de in Hokkien. Now, what kind of tea actually was imported from Fujian by the British or by the Dutch trading company? It's not the WuYi tea that we think of nowadays, yen cha. No. It is actually black tea. It is fully oxidized tea. And there, the major one was Lapsang Saochong. There is a myth about its invention that Teaparker mentions. People say it was invented by accident when an army came attacking this area. The farmers fled while they were working on the tea, and when the dust settled, the farmers came back, and because the tea had rested for such a long time, it had oxidized by itself, and so the farmers continued to work on it, and instead of having green tea, they ended up with fully oxidized red tea. So this is a myth. We don't have the exact solution of exactly how it was invented. There's no inventor, but it's funny that this kind of myth would stick and be mentioned. Now, speaking of red tea from WuYi, so the most famous one, the best grade, is called Lapsang Saochong. Then the next grade is called Saochong. Then we have Gongfu. Then we have Zhehai, Zhangyan, Zhangpian, and the last one is Lanxiang. So the different grades from the best to the lowest on the scale. Now, other very famous red teas from China were Anhui Qihong, Yunnan Dianhong, and Guangdong Yinhong. Now you hear Hong, 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 that's the word for red. That's why I use the term red tea, because that's the literal translation from these names. It's red tea, Hong Cha. And when a good tea is imitated, it also sometimes gets a name. A fake Lapsang Saochong in Chinese would be called Waishan Xiaozhong, which means Lapsang Saochong that comes from another mountain. In the year 1823, Lipton made an innovation and an improvement. For the first time, they sold their red teas in metal canisters, which helped to preserve freshness. Now, the British had run a trade deficit with China because they were importing a lot of goods from there, porcelain and tea especially, and the Chinese were mostly interested in gold and silver, real silver, metal, but not in many other products. So this trade deficit really was a problem for the British, which unfortunately they solved. Well, first they tried to solve it by copying tea and making it in India, in Sri Lanka or Indonesia, other places that they controlled. That was one solution. So they started in 1832 to make tea in India. The most famous one that we know is from Darjeeling. And since this did not completely work, in 1840 they launched the Opium War, which led the British to sell opium, which was of course illegal in China, but which was one thing that they were able to sell. And due to this Opium War, they were also able to open 5 more ports for international trade in 1843, so 3 years after the war. 2 of these ports were in Fujian, the largest in Fuzhou, which is nearest to WuYi. And thanks to this port that is now open to trade directly with Great Britain, the tea in WuYi really experienced a huge growth. Farmers were able to plant more tea, and this led really to good business for the Chinese, especially the Chinese farmers in WuYi. Queen Victoria was also very instrumental in the tea traditions in Europe. She established the tradition of afternoon tea. She lived from 1819 to 1901. And as price dropped by producing it elsewhere and by having more farmers producing it also around WuYi, the tea was not just consumed by royals and their court and aristocrats, but also more and more by literati, by merchants, and everybody tried to imitate the queen in the court by having tea during the afternoon. Now we see this also in the works of several poets, and so I find it also interesting that Teaparker went through the literature and English literature and found the poems. Now I was not able to quote exactly the poems that he found because he translated them in Chinese. So instead, I looked for these poets and tried to find where they quoted tea in their poems. So here I have Alexander Pope in a poem called The Rape of the Lock. It was written in the year 1711. And there are two excerpts I would like to read quickly, which contain mentions to tea. Oh, had I rather unadmired remained in some lone isle or distant northern land, where the gilt chariot never marked the way, where none learn ombre, none ever taste bohea. So here, bohea, B-O-H-E-A, is the tea from WuYi. So in 1711, Alexander Pope uses this precise name in his poem, not just once, but also a little bit later. He talks about tea. Hear thou, great Anna, whom 3 realms obey, dost sometimes counsel take, and sometimes tea. So also here it's a bit funny to take counsel or to take tea. There's another poet, Edward Young. In the year 1725, he wrote The Love of Fame, the Universal Passion. And here a small excerpt. Her 2 red lips affected Zephyr's blow to cool the bohea and inflame the bow, while 1 white finger and thumb conspire to lift the cup and make the world admire. So here again the use of the name bohea, B-O-H-E-A, which describes exactly tea from WuYi, but not yen cha, not the oolongs that we know nowadays, but the red tea that is also called lapsang saochong, and there is also a mention of Lord Byron making a poem, but I thought 2 poems is already enough. It's not so easy to make the correct pronunciation. Another important land learned about tea in around that time, just before the Qing dynasty started. It's Russia. It's in 1638 that they discovered tea thanks to Ambassador Starko, that they discovered red tea from WuYi. And French invention, the samovar, contributed to this expansion of red tea in Russia, and it was further improved during the 18th century. This invention helps to have 1 concentrated cup of tea and hot water, and then it's very easy to prepare tea. You simply add your boiling water to the concentrate, and quickly you have a cup of tea that you can drink. Okay, that's it for today. So today we saw that the tea that was exported to Europe was mostly red tea. 70% of the tea exported in 1880 from WuYi was actually red tea, even though nowadays it's only a niche market, lapsang saochong, and then also a bit jinjunmei. These 2 red teas are are produced in much smaller quantity compared to the yen cha nowadays in WuYi, and will talk more about this Yensha in 1 month again, when I continue with my summary of this book. And I hope that you'll stick around to learn about it. So you see, the reason why I chose this more striped tea from Taiwan is, and it's highly oxidized, is because of today's class, where we focused more on red tea rather than the oolongs that are nowadays made in larger number in WuYi. So thank you very much for your interest. Please let me know if you have any questions now. I'm going to check the chat. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the class. Subscribe if you don't want to miss any updates. And I will see you next week for another class where we continue to study our tea sampler for this semester. We'll move to the second tea, which is a Qingxing Oolong from Alishan, Jiangsu. So I hope it will be interesting. Elizabeth writes, so many terms and tea names that are familiar to me from reading. Will I retain all of it? Of course not, but you put things in a context that makes me want to learn more. Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I'm glad that you enjoyed listening to this class and these names. And there will be more material, and you see, that's why I needed the notes, because there were a lot of very precise vocabulary, lots of numbers, lots of dates that needed to be told with precision. I could not do all this by memory. So thanks for your interest again. You write, the poetry was also familiar. I will go back to them and reread. Yeah, you can find it on Project Gutenberg, especially the Edward Young, especially the other one, Alexander Pope, The Rape of the Lock. This quite long poem is a very nice read, very courteous poetry. I enjoyed reading it all, but it was really too long. And there were some other mentions. There was also a mention of the teapot in the poem. So I really recommend this poem, The Rape of the Lock, the story of a woman who's giving away a lock of her hair, and this leads to some frustration later on. Like a broken promise. Okay, thank you very much. I will see you next week. This is a promise I'm not going to break. Cheers, and have a great Sunday. Bye bye.